So we're in a series right now called Conversion. And the question that we've been asking is, but what should it look like? What should I do now? How do I know what a convert, what a Christian, what one who has been converted, how do I know what that looks like? And what I want to know is, am I doing it right? Or who is doing it right? And if there is someone, can I just copy them? And what does this whole Naaman story that we've been looking at have to do with us appearing and behaving more like Christ after we've been saved? So it's not just about, I don't smoke or chew or run with girls who do. This is about foundational thinking processes that are going to grow strong in representing the kingdom of God and allowing those guiding thoughts that we would have previously have been driven by to be driven away. No longer part of the kingdom of this world, but now being citizens of the kingdom of God. What does it look like? How do we do that? And that's what we've been looking at in the past 3 episodes of our series, Conversion, the transformed life. And you know what? Surprise! That's what we're going to continue to look at today in episode 4. Okay? So to enter into the transformed life, what kind of stuff changes? So today we're going to start with number 1. From how to who. Our modern consumer culture is obsessed with the question, how? How do I find success? How do I find my soulmate? How do I raise healthy kids? How do I overcome my anxiety? How do I live my best life now? These questions are around us all the time. Now, do you remember the story that we're talking about? We did take a little break there, so we're coming back. So let me give you a quick refresher. We're going to run through the story to where we have been up until now. 2 Kings chapter 5, starting at verse 1. Now Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. Aram is Syria. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. 2. Now, bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and they'd taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. 3. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." 4. Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. 5. "By all means, go," the king of Aram replied. "I will send a letter. I'll send a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. 6. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, "With this letter, I'm sending my servant Naaman to you, so that you may cure him of his leprosy." 7. As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy?" See? You see how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me? 8. When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him this message. "Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." 9. So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. 10. Elisha sent a messenger to say to him, "Go, wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed." 11. But Naaman went away angry and said, "I thought that he would surely come out to me, stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot, and cure me of my leprosy." 12. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed? So he turned, and he went off in a rage. Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. Today is a very special day. You might say it's a life-transforming day, perhaps a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for your spiritual journey. I have and will reveal to you an ancient, semi-mystical, esoteric spirit encounter technique. And I'm going to train you in it. And yes, it will all happen today in this room. Just wait, not yet. We're going to get there, but you must be patient. Now, to get your minds churning on what this could possibly be, I have some of these regular household pots. The same kind of pots that have been used throughout history. And with these pots, I will show you how to open a portal between you and the triune God himself, a doorway to the eternal, a gateway to the great beyond, a map to the hidden pathways of the other world, the spirit world. Stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. All will be revealed shortly. Many of our best-selling products and books are predicated on answering the question, how? And this question dominates North American pulpits with sermons designed to attract religious consumers looking for some practical help. How do I do it? Ours is a society fixated on techniques and formulas and processes, the secret sauce, the magic bullet, the key ingredient. In this regard, we share a lot in common with pre-Christian societies, with pagan religions, just like the sort like they practiced in Naaman's homeland. Those are a spirituality of technique. They were interested in securing desired outcomes, and they do that through appeasement, manipulation, and control of deities or spiritual forces. Idolatry and pagan worship are all about how. How do I defeat my enemy? How do I know the future? How do I ensure a good harvest? How do I make it rain? How do I cure my disease? And the answer to how required employing the right techniques or processes in the form of incantations and witchcraft and divination and sacrifices and astrology and other superstitious practices. That's how you do it. And if, there's a big if, but if done precisely and correctly, the gods would give you what you sought. Deviate from the correct process, however, and you would be denied. It's all very mechanical, very transactional, and fearful. Sort of like ordering lunch from Seinfeld's Soup Nazi, right? No soup for you! Do it right or get out. Naaman carried these pagan assumptions when he sought healing from Israel's God. So he expected Elisha to give him elaborate instructions, detailed rituals to cure his leprosy. And we must assume that Naaman had already tried every kind of spell and sorcery available in Syria without success. Otherwise, he wouldn't be here. So, when Elisha told him to simply go bathe in the Jordan River, the most ordinary activity imaginable, Naaman was furious. Was Elisha mocking him? Was he deliberately treating him with disrespect because he's a foreigner? Was the prophet of Israel hiding this knowledge about how to control his God because Naaman was a Syrian and his enemy? Was he holding out on Naaman, hoping to get paid before giving up his secret knowledge? No. Elisha was not being cruel, and unlike the pagan priests in Syria, he was not being transactional. He was being transformational. Elisha knew that Naaman's idolatry and paganism were fixated on detailed techniques. So he didn't give him any. He wanted to shift Naaman's focus from the question, how, to the question, who. The most important thing was not how to heal his leprosy, but who would heal his leprosy. And Elisha wanted Naaman to discover the living God of Israel, who was beyond the control of any priest or prophet. So the warning for you is be wary of ministries or Christian leaders offering endless techniques with guaranteed outcomes. And be cautious of those always selling solutions about how to do something God's way, but who display very little of his character themselves. We learn to discern by fruit. What is the fruit of their lives? What is the fruit of their ministry? Do they have the appearance and the aroma of Jesus? Matthew 7:18. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. 19. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. 20. Thus, by their fruit, you will recognize them. 21. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. 22. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name drive out demons? And in your name perform many miracles? 23. And then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. It is entirely possible to run our lives with biblical principles centered on Christian values and still miss the only thing that ultimately matters, Jesus Christ himself. The real question of our faith and of life itself is not how, but who. Number 2, practicing the presence of God. Like Naaman, many of us carry the assumption that God's presence and power may be encountered through external, extraordinary experiences. And despite being rooted in pagan rather than Christian notions of religion, the evangelical industrial complex remains unmotivated to dissuade us of this belief. After all, selling religious consumers on bigger, better experiences is both ego-satisfying and economically beneficial for professional Christians. In my years as a pastor and as an observer of our Christian culture, I've been struck by our addiction to elaborate experiences. I've been to conventions with acres of vendors selling theatrical equipment to churches and sound systems and smoke and haze machines, hydraulics, pyrotechnics, lasers, and even 3D holograph projectors. And I got to tell you, I kind of like all that stuff. And I've met and I've read about pastors who were deeply influenced by this philosophy of ministry. One said, Sunday morning worship should be more entertaining than anything on television. And another frequently called his church the mountaintop, a direct reference to Moses' experience with God on Mount Sinai. And to be fair, most of these church leaders were very well-intentioned, passionate in their beliefs. And they genuinely believed that people would encounter God in their $50 million religious theaters, and that the Holy Spirit reached the lost through the smoke cannons and the flying stage rigs. And maybe he did. Maybe he does. But in the process, people also internalized the message that God was only to be met in the extraordinary and never in the mundane. And the prevalence of that view helps explain a pastor survey from a few years ago asking to rank 12 areas of ministry by priority. Prayer came in dead last, with only 3% saying it was a priority. Prayer, of course, is the opposite of an exciting external experience. Well, it does happen to be much more affordable, too. When Elisha told Naaman to simply wash in the Jordan River to be cured, Naaman was outraged. He was expecting something more elaborate and exciting. This is a big deal. Likewise, if more pastors simply taught their congregations how to pray and cultivate their own internal communion with God, I wonder how many churchgoers might be upset about making the trip, because they were expecting something more exciting, like emotional worship music or a powerful sermon. Naaman wondered why he had traveled all the way to Israel simply to bathe in a river when the rivers in his country are better. The whole thing he could have done in Syria. And if encountering God may be done through the quiet communion of prayer, Christians may ask, why bother climbing the mountaintop of a church service every week or two? Given our addiction to external experiences, I think the example of Brother Lawrence is important to consider. And I first came across Brother Lawrence in a small book that he wrote, The Practice of the Presence of God. I came across it when I was a Bible college student. Lawrence was born in poverty in 1614. After enlisting in the French army for a tiny salary and regular meals, somehow he connects with God, and he experienced a significant conversion to Christ. And then he went and he joined a monastery. And for the remainder of his life, Brother Lawrence worked in a kitchen. And it was among the pots and the pans that he would experience a remarkable life of prayer with God. He believed firmly that all of life was sacred, and that those who believed times of corporate worship drew one closer to God suffered from a great delusion. With words that are still relevant today, Lawrence said, "Men invent means and methods of coming at God's love. They learn rules, they set up devices to remind them of that love. And it seems like a world of trouble to bring oneself into the consciousness of God's presence. Yet it might be so simple. Is it not quicker and easier just to do our common business, wholly for the love of Him?" Rather than seeking external experiences to fuel his spirituality, Brother Lawrence cultivated a life of ceaseless prayer, as the Apostle Paul advised. And with his sanctified imagination, he engaged in his common business in the kitchen, ever mindful of God's presence. He wrote this, "As often as I could, I placed myself as a worshiper before Him, fixing my mind upon His holy presence, recalling it when I found it wandering from Him." So ever radiating the joy and the peace of Christ, Lawrence began to attract others to this very simple practice. He continues, "There is not in the world a kind of life more sweet and delightful than that of continual conversation with God. Those can only comprehend it who practice and experience it." So given the amount of money and effort we spend building and ascending religious mountaintops to experience God, it is a life-changing discovery to find that He is no less present in the most ordinary places, and that we may commune with Him right where we are. John 4:19, "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you are a prophet." 20, "Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." 21, "Woman," Jesus replied, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem." 22. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. 23. Yet a time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. 24. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the spirit and in truth. Number 3, remain where you are with God. Naaman assumed that to encounter Israel's God, experience his power, be healed of his leprosy, that it would require 3 things. At least 3 things. First, he needed to change his location by traveling from Syria to Israel. Got to go there. Second, he needed to find a prophet of God, an expert who could carefully mediate between himself and God. Finally, third, he would need to precisely perform elaborate rituals to manipulate God into giving him his blessing. All 3 of these assumptions are profoundly pagan. And they all assume that engaging with God requires an external change in location, whether it's location, traveling from Syria to Israel, an activity from the mundane to the sacred ritual, or a relationship from an ordinary person to a religious expert. By refusing to even meet with Naaman, and by giving him no elaborate rituals to perform, Elisha was deconstructing Naaman's pagan assumptions about Israel's God. Sometimes it's just better to do something than it is to debate about doing something. And unfortunately, these same beliefs persist among many Christians today. For example, within the evangelical tradition, there is a common assumption that while God invites everyone into a relationship, only those Christians who profoundly change their external circumstances will truly ever know him. This view has come as the result of emphasizing certain gospel stories, like Jesus calling Peter, Andrew, James, and John to leave their fishing businesses, to follow him and become fishers of men, while at the same time de-emphasizing or ignoring other stories, like the many people Jesus did not call to leave their homes or vocations. And sometimes he even sent people back home who wanted to leave everything and follow him. Mark chapter 5, verse 18. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. 19. Jesus did not let him. 19. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." 20. So the man went away and began to tell them the Decapolis, that's a group of 10 cities, how much Jesus had done for him. And all the people were amazed. Also, consider the Apostle Paul. Jesus called him to leave the confines of his Jewish community to carry the gospel to the Gentiles. And Paul traveled widely, and he planted churches, and he endured terrible persecution. And through it all, he also experienced a deep and abiding communion with Christ. And yet, Paul did not universalize his calling or his condition. He did not tell other Christians to leave their circumstances to go and change the world, a message that's become ubiquitous in many youth and young adult ministries today. Change the world. In fact, Paul taught precisely the opposite. He told the Christians when he was in Thessalonica, 1 Thessalonians 4:11, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business. Work with your hands, just as we told you. 12, so that with your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, so that you will not be dependent on anybody. And when the believers in Corinth wrote to Paul asking what circumstances of life were ideal for following Jesus, the apostle gave a remarkable answer. The Corinthians, like Naaman, were shaped by many pagan assumptions. They believed encountering God required changing one's external conditions. So, they made a list, and they asked Paul, should a believer change their relational status, married or single? Should they change their religious status, circumcised or uncircumcised? What about their vocational status, slave or free? And Paul, just like Elisha centuries earlier, rejected the entire premise of their question. Instead, he repeatedly says, every believer should remain exactly where they are and in the same vocation, because the Christian life is not contingent upon changing our external circumstances. 1 Corinthians 7:17. Nevertheless, each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned to them, just as God has called them. This is the rule I lay down in all the churches. 18. Was a man already circumcised when he was called? He should not become uncircumcised. Was a man uncircumcised when he was called? He should not be circumcised. 19. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing. Keeping God's commands is what counts. 20. Each person should remain in the situation they were in when God called them. 21. Were you a slave when you were called? Don't let it trouble you. Although, if you can gain your freedom, do so. 22. For the one who was a slave when called to faith in the Lord is the Lord's freed person. Similarly, the one who was free when called is Christ's slave. 23. You were bought with a price. Do not become slaves of human beings. 24. Brothers and sisters, each person is responsible to God, should remain in the situation they were in when God called them. Unlike pagan views of religion, Paul understood that the fullness of the Christian life was available to anyone, anywhere, and at any time. Because the fullness of the Christian life is Christ Himself and not what we do for Him. Now, is it wrong to change our circumstances? Of course not. Even Paul told those who were enslaved, seek your freedom if they have opportunity. And if called by God to a new vocation, the way that Paul was, we absolutely ought to obey. The problem is not changing our circumstances, but believing these changes will increase or decrease our status before God, or that a different, more sacred vocation will equip us to more fully experience the Christian life. All of Christ is available to all of us. Despite what Naaman and the Corinthians and many Christians today may think, our life with God is not contingent upon external things like our location, like our condition, like our vocation. Rather, it is about cultivating an internal, ongoing communion with Christ right where we are. 4, gratuity does not equal gratitude. Tipping has long been customary at full-service restaurants and bars, for taxis and in hotels. Coffee and ice cream shops often have a tip jar right there where the cash is, where they might drop their change. But most fast food or counter service restaurants never ask for a gratuity. But then Starbucks came along. And when Starbucks added a tip screen for their credit card transactions in 22, it signaled a significant change. Suddenly, it seemed like every business started asking for tips. So a guy I know is traveling, he's in the airport, and he decides that he's going to go purchase a protein bar and a bottle of water. And he goes to one of those airport terminal snack shops. So he grabs his stuff and he walks up to the self-checkout, scans his items, and the machine asked him if he wanted to add a 20% tip. For who? Honestly, what's up with that? And so you've probably been thinking something similar as you are continually prompted to tip. Our tipping culture is getting out of control. So it kind of provoked me to go and research this trend. So when traveling in Europe, some North Americans are surprised to discover that other Western democracies do not share our habit of tipping. Thank you. Give her a tip. That's because North American gratuity culture germinated from its unique history. In the United States, following the Civil War, there's now millions of formerly enslaved African Americans out seeking jobs. But few white business owners were inclined to hire them. So you're free, but you can't get a job. Eventually, some were allowed to start working in service positions, but without pay. And instead, they relied almost entirely on tips from customers. So most famously, you can think of the black workers on the Pullman train cars. They shined shoes, made beds, they were the morning wake-up call, and so on. And they worked long hours, and they relied heavily on tips for pay. In time, African Americans filled more gratuity-funded service jobs as doormen, as elevator operators, as drivers, as porters, bellboys. Eventually, as more business owners realized tips were an easy way to reduce their expenses and to shift labor costs directly to customers, the practice expanded throughout the country. So, what began as a racist policy to avoid paying African Americans a fair wage became a widespread and uniquely American practice. Even today, 160 years after the Civil War, more businesses are adopting the custom, even ones that have replaced their employees with a self-checkout screen. And we Canadians imported that too. Tariff that. So why am I sharing this history lesson? Because you love it. And because it illustrates that gratuity isn't necessarily about gratitude. Strictly speaking, a tip, a gratuity, is supposed to be a gift offered in thankfulness. It is neither expected nor demanded. But in reality, that's not how it's practiced. In many places, failing to leave a tip is deeply offensive and the moral equivalent of stealing. The worker feels cheated, robbed out of their well-earned pay. And there's plenty of videos that you can watch out there of delivery drivers losing their minds when the tip is not large enough. It is expected. And I know this snub well, having worked for tips at a restaurant when I was in high school. And at least as it's done in North America, tipping is not a free act of appreciation. It is an obligatory act to finalize a transaction. Which, finally, and I'm sure you were beginning to wonder where this rant was headed, finally coming back to Naaman's story. 2 Kings 5, next verse in line 13. Naaman's servants went to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it?" How much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed? 14. So he went down and he dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him. And his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. 15. Then Naaman and all his attendants went back to the man of God, and he stood before him and said, now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. So please accept a gift from your servant. After following Elisha's instructions, bathing in the Jordan River, Naaman's leprosy disappears. And after this miraculous healing, Naaman returns, goes back to Elisha, and presents him with a gift. Remember, he had traveled from Syria with an astronomical amount of wealth, approximately 750 pounds of silver and 6,000 pieces of gold. And to the casual reader, dude, that looks like a really good tip. An act of gratuity flowing from Naaman's deep thankfulness. But despite urging him to accept the money, Elisha refused. Verse 16, the prophet answered, as surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept a thing. And even though Naaman urged him, he refused. Why? Isn't that kind of being rude again? What's Elisha's big deal with this? Why is he always going to turn it into something? Why did the prophet reject Naaman's gift? Because Elisha recognized when a gift is not a gift. He understood that not all gratuities are about gratitude. Does God want our tips? Does he require or need our sacrifices? Psalm 50, verse 7. Listen, my people, and I will speak. I will testify against you, Israel. I am God, your God. 8. I bring no charges against you concerning your sacrifices or concerning your burnt offerings, which are ever before me. 9. I have no need of a bull from your stall or of goats from your pens. 10. For every animal in the forest is mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills. 11. I know every bird in the mountains, and the insects in the fields are mine. 12. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world is mine, and all that is in it. 13. Do I eat the flesh of bulls, or drink the blood of goats? To cut it down even more, to make it more clear, more blatant, the prophet Hosea, chapter 6, verse 6. God speaking. For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, an acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings. Or from the Message, let's pull it up into our language. I'm after love that lasts, not more religion. I want you to know God, not to go to more prayer meetings. Come and meet me. Come and meet me when you're washing the pots and the pans. When we meet there, I will remind you that you can fly because I will catch you. Tune in next episode when we will examine what was really behind Naaman's gift and why his refusal to accept it is what ultimately caused Naaman to give his allegiance to Israel's God. Kind Father, thank you for your love. Thank you for your provision. And today, as we have seen, thank you for the simplicity. We love you when we obey you. You're not looking for us to give you bulls. You're not demanding of our sacrifices to you. What you want is us. And what we are so unwilling to give you is us. We'll pay almost anything to avoid that direct contact with you. We'll look for almost any other way to get in good with you without coming straight to you. God, I pray that you would open our eyes, that we would be able to see you, and then you would help create in our hearts the desire to run after you. Just you. Jesus first. Everything else after. Christ alone. Seek you first, and then everything else comes after that. And even in a church, even in a Christian setting, this is incredibly difficult to actually do consistently. So God, again, we thank you for your patience. Because we can come here week after week and not get it and not live it. Awaken within us a desire for you and for you alone. Thank you for the freedom to meet with you anywhere, anytime, and to connect with you potentially as deep or deeper than anyone else we have ever met, regardless of their vocation. You treat us all equally. Thank you for that. Because I like to compare. And I always find someone who I say is better than me. They deserve you, God, but I do not. And we struggle with your grace. Oh, boy, do we struggle with it. Give us freedom. In this way, I pray, Jesus, to see you and run after you well. Guide us forward into this week with our eyes open regardless of what we are doing. And help that connection go to 4 bars, full bars, wherever we are. Thank you, Jesus.